Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for part 3 of the webinar, Wildfire Preparedness and Response Plan, Best Practices and Lessons Learned, hosted by Everbridge. To introduce our speakers today, we are joined by Bryan Koon. Bryan is the Vice President of International Homeland Security and Emergency Management at IEM and has previously served as Director of Emergency Management for Florida and Walmart, as well as President of the National Emergency Management Association. We are also very excited to have featured guest speaker and subject matter expert Chief Kim Zagaris here with us today. Chief Zagaris is the Wildfire Policy and Technology Advisor for the Western Fire Chiefs Association. This new position he holds is brand new and was created in response to the destructive wildfires that have unfolded across the West. Prior to this new title, Chief Zagaris retired as State and Rescue Chief for the State of California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, a position he held for 18 years. During his 42-year fire service career, he served under 6 governors and has been actively involved in every major and catastrophic emergency in California, as well as several in the nation. Before we begin, I'd just like to go over Q&A participation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your control panel, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And now to get started, I will hand it over to you, Bryan.
Well, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Great to see you all again. Thank you for joining me in part 3 of what has, for me so far, been an extremely interesting series. I'm talking to some of our greatest experts in the country about this wildfire season and what it potentially means for us down the road. So I'm thrilled to be here with you again today. As a reminder, you know, this 2020 is one of those years we're going to look back on as really a seminal year in both emergency management and firefighting, because we've had, you know, both a historic year for fires in the West, for hurricanes in the Atlantic, and both of those layered on top of the greatest pandemic in 100 years. So it's one of those years where our systems have been tested, where they've been strained, in places they've been broken, and in other areas they've been highly successful and resilient and performed exactly as how we hoped they would. And so it's a great time this year and going forward to really take a few moments to reflect on it and consider what do we need to take away from this, and how can we improve going forward. You know, as I've said before, we do a good job in emergency management, firefighting, public health, etc., and doing after action reviews and going in and trying to figure out, you know, what are the lessons learned? How do we incorporate them into our policies and procedures going forward, into the way we educate our practitioners? The problem with those is that they take a long time. And so you won't necessarily be able to incorporate the lessons of 2020 into our systems until sometime in 2021, 2022 or beyond. And so the purpose of this webinar, this series, really is to pause in the middle and see if there are things that we can start doing right now. You know, what are the best practices that we can incorporate immediately? How do we share these ideas across different borders? And really, you know, again, get the information we need to the practitioners out in the field. And so that's the purpose of the entire series. As you've already heard, I'm thrilled today to have Chief Kim Zagaris from California with us. He has decades of experience in this field, and so we'll be building upon the knowledge and information that we got in the first 2 of these series from our colleagues in Idaho and Utah, respectively. And again, I really think we're going to learn a lot from Chief Zagaris today. Here's our agenda, and for any of those who have joined us for the first 2, it's going to look pretty familiar. What are we learning? How do we take advantage of those lessons? How quickly can we do that? And what are we missing? What do we need to do going forward? And then we're going to do that in the same way we've done before. You know, in the preparedness side, in the current response side, and then, you know, what are we going to do as we start moving into recovery? So without further ado, Chief, thank you for joining me today. Really excited to have you here. I want to kind of start talking about how do you, as a professional, and how did you, when you were with the state of California, get your organizations ready and get your folks engaged and excited about, not excited about, but prepared for what could be coming their way for a wildfire season like we saw this year? How did you go about motivating those folks and getting them up to speed?
I think we're a lot of similar in what goes on. I think, normally just for wildfire season, we always take a look at the predictions for fire season. We look at the fuels, we look at what the weather is, we look at the past seasons, and we actually also go back and start looking at where we're at with our people, our training, our capabilities. This year, is we've been, at least in the West, have been really seeing a very heightened increase in wildfires across the West, not just California. And I would tell you that then the advent of COVID really made some changes. And, not only at the local, state, federal, and the tribal areas, really had to start taking a look at how we were going to respond, how we were going to make sure it was safe for our personnel. Looked at all those particular issues. On top of that, I think, from a fire, law enforcement, emergency management, EMS side of the house, we also looked at how it's going to affect how we do our evacuations, how we're going to shelter our people. All very interesting items. And at least with COVID, we literally had to put policies and procedures in place and start to write and be more coordinated than we ever had in the past. COVID, on top of everything else, has also brought some really very tight financial issues at the local, state, federal, and tribal levels that we're also having to deal with as well. Not enough PPE and making sure we're able to respond to do those things. So it's been interesting. Being prepared to take care of our day-to-day responses of the 911 call, especially at the local level, dealing with COVID, also means we've probably seen less resources available for response for mutual aid, not only locally, but regionally, but statewide. And in some cases, we're responding with national resources, both through EMAC and through interstate compacts, as well as through our federal partners and internationally. It's been very interesting preparing for it.
Yeah, indeed. Chief, when I was a director in Florida, I spent a lot of my time talking directly to the citizens of the state and trying to encourage them to get ready for hurricane season. I'm sure you did the same in California. And you've also been there a long time and seen a tremendous growth in the state as people moved to California and also moved out into the wildland urban interface. How do you educate folks that are new to California or educate the folks that have been there for a while about the changing conditions to help them prepare better for fire season?
I think across the nation, we're all struggling with continuing to do ongoing education. And what's always amazing is that we have more technology and capability to send information out, podcasts and through the media and through the internet than we've ever had. But it's always amazes me how folks are not prepared. And I think it will continue we'll continue to deal with it, but we continue to put more effort into really educating the locals into, at least in wildfire season, what we call ready, set, go. And if people locally are dealing with the wildland, they can just go, ready, set, go. And started out in California, became a national program, and is really good. And Ready is actually educating the citizens, educating the families that they know what to do, how to prepare for themselves in a case of emergency. And while we say wildland, Ready, Set, Go really should apply to any emergency and people being prepared ahead of time. Whether it's having your medication, your valuables, whatever it is that you need to put together, not waiting until the emergency comes down. Set really is, it's coming, you gather that information, you have it ready to go. And when we say go, we need people to evacuate. I'm really astonished in my 42 years, especially since I tell people, boy, I didn't think I'd see anything like the Oakland Hills in 1991 when we lost 25 lives, including one fire battalion chief and one police officer. And 2017 to lose 86 individuals in the fires was really something that is really hard to describe. 2018, we saw fires and look at Paradise, and I've watched at least in 2020 now, both not only in California but in Oregon. I was just there, and I'm amazed the number of folks that knew something was coming but yet didn't get out soon enough. And I really think we just need to continue to educate the public, start with the kids in school and continue to work our way through for all these different emergencies. But I think when we ask people to go, we don't take it lightly. We don't want to see folks out of their house. We'd like to see them there if at all possible. And as soon as we actually start thinking about evacuations, in the back of our mind, we're thinking about how quickly we can repopulate people as well. And so if I tell anybody, it's really, we're constantly looking at lessons learned. We're constantly trying to adjust to make things better. What's really kind of amazing with the emergencies that I continue to see is, now we can have people actually sign up when there's an emergency, and we can do an electric notification, especially since a lot of folks don't have landlines anymore. They do it by way of their phones. It's really amazing how many people still aren't signed up where they're at and don't, get even more prepared. So I think those are some of the real easy lessons that if we're going to continue to educate, continue to do, folks, we've got to continue to put more time and energy into those particular areas. And I think some of us are old enough to say, boy, I remember when the cell phones first came out, just few people had them. Now our kids have them. And so whether it be for active shooter, whether it be for a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, you name it, a wildfire, a hazardous materials event, a train derailment, I'd advise most people to please get signed up locally in your community with your emergency managers on your notifications, so you can get these things more timely. Whether you're at home or at work, that notification will come in and you'll be better prepared and make sure you have that plan for you and your family, where you're going to go or where you're going to meet if you're not together at the end of the day. Those are the types of things I think that I really look for. The other side of the house is, at least on the wildland side, is really getting people prepared to really take responsibility for their property, for their homes, their largest investment next to their loved ones. Mm-hmm. And from there, I would tell folks to do the proper clearance. Look at what you have put up around the house, what you built around the house, what you've attached to the house in that particular environment. The other thing I would really tell folks to take a real strong look at, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily always the flames that burn down the house from wildland. It's really now the ember intrusions from the wind and that come in there. And I could tell you, at least in California, that in 2008, we passed a wildland code for people building a wildland interface. And I could tell you that those houses that have been built after 2008 meet that code have a much better chance of still standing than those built prior. And Paradise was really a good case of that. We could see the number of structures that were lost that were built prior to that code and those were built after. It's a really good testament of that side of the house. So again, take care of your property. If you haven't hardened the structure, look at hardening those particular those homes and those facilities against ember intrusion, and take anything that may burn or is flammable away from it. We always I tell people, I said, you want your home to look like a park. You live in a real forested area, that means you probably need to thin them out. You need to buck them way up and thin those things out and do as much as you can to have that defensible space. At the end of the day, we just do not have, I don't care where you're at, there are not enough fire engines to protect everybody's home in the wildland urban phase as we see across the West every summer. And what we generally do is most agencies rely upon mutual aid. They move these resources, and we still don't have enough. And California has been real fortunate. At some point this summer, I think there were 30-some thousand people out on the front lines throughout the West. More than half of those were in California, either from our own resources that were brought in through our interstate compacts or EMAC, or through our federal partners through other means. But you know, that's a real a pretty large overlay of what I've just how do we prepare, how do we do those things.
Yeah. Chief, one of the things I do is I work on a group called the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, and we take a look at how do you protect your home, you know, for floods, fires, wind events, seismic events, and often I'm surprised at how inexpensive it can be to harden your home, especially for wind events. I mean, just a few dollars more on the cost of building a house to do the appropriate tie downs and apply the shingles appropriately make a huge difference in the event. Do you have any sense of, you know, you talked about hardening your home against ember intrusion, those kinds of things. Could you have any idea what a ballpark it takes to do for a home like that? For, you know, a typical home?
It really depends on, you know, size of the structure, the age of the structure. Also depends on just you know, do you do it yourself or do you hire somebody? And I think at the end of the day, the clearance alone can get fairly expensive if you have to hire outside folks. But yeah, I think it really depends on the area and whether, you know, the type of wildland interface that you're in. But I would say for as low as maybe a couple $100, depending on the age of the structure, to you know, probably in the neighborhood of 50, 80,000, depending on just how much you have to do. But you know, one of the things we talk about in the business is that it's amazing how people will do a remodel in their house, to remodel the kitchen, remodel this, remodel at the end of the day, but they won't spend the time to remodel, you know, to protect the entire structure. One of the things that I can tell you, we at the Western Fire Chiefs are really taking a look at is threat assessments in the wildland are done really with a broad brush. We look at what the risk is out there. Mostly, like the state of California looks at that. We actually believe it's time to start really looking to get down, drilling down, not on a broad brush side of this on a whole community, but getting down to the parcel level on these particular issues. And I'll tell you why. We know that the more each individual homeowner has that clearance, takes more responsibility, the more they'll be able to survive than the neighbor or somebody else who doesn't. And at the end of the day, it'd be really great to work with the insurance companies. With one of the things we're trying to do is provide incentives that if you do if you harden the house, you do the clearances and do those things, that'll make it more survivable. Those are the things we'd like to actually see the insurance companies get to a point where, you know, you're rewarded by reducing your monthly, yearly cost of your home insurance, as an example, at the end of that day. And the insurance companies really have the ability to work with us the best to really reduce that down. You've been around long enough in the business that, well, we've had federal and state programs that have provided money down to folks to do mitigation. And really, the more we mitigate this up front, the more we save the initial response costs. Goes a long ways and out of this. And I think that's the real key that we see in the future, at least on the wildland side of the house, because again, we just do not have enough structures. And I would tell you this, when firefighters are operating in the wildland and urban phase, a house that has better clearance and one that has no clearance has a better chance whether they're going to get a fire engine or not. And again, we're ultimately putting firefighters at risk, trying to protect some of the structures. And at the end of the day, that's really not really not a good trade-off, you know, to give up a firefighter lives to save somebody's house. It just doesn't add up. And I think we have some very valiant fire personnel, and these aren't just career. We're also talking volunteers in some of the rural areas that are also the same people in the community that are out there that we really need to take a look at it. We also put our law enforcement folks at great risk, as well as some of the EMS folks. And I would tell you this, in the last 2017, 2018, and again in 2020, we're seeing such fires with such magnitude that we are literally taking our fire personnel and telling them not to, you know, to work on rescues only, get people evacuated, and not engage in the fire. That's how bad it is become across the West right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go on to the next one where we talk about response, because I think, I think for many of the people who watch these webinars, including me, can't even fathom the magnitude of the fires that you're dealing with when you're dealing with 100,000, to 1 million acre fires. And when we hear it all the time, it's the size of Rhode Island, it's the size of Connecticut, whatever the case may be. It almost seems unfathomable. So what you're saying is there's a point at which you really are just focused on saving lives and having to let the fire do some of its own work and putting itself out. Is that where you've gotten this season?
Well, actually, it's where we've been in 17, 18, and 2020. And I mean, it's to the point where we've literally taken people that they couldn't get out. We've gotten them to open areas. Maybe it's a big shopping center parking lot where we bring everybody together with a number of engines and then protect everybody in a big open area. That's one of the things that we're actually doing. I can tell you during the campfire in Paradise, we actually took people inside of a big box store and brought them inside while the fire went over, as an example. But it's not. It's something we don't generally train our firefighters. We're actually having this open conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just us. I do work internationally, having the conversation with Australia and Chile and some of the other organizations or other countries, and really trying to take a look how we're doing business and where we're going to be in the long run.
So that's a whole new skill set that your firefighters need to have and consider. How do you provide that training? Are you doing that on the fly, or are you building that more into their, as they prepare for this career?
We're actually just starting to build this in. I mean, we've actually, here's a good one. And during the campfire in Paradise, California, they took some of the crew carriers that they have the hand crews in, and actually loaded folks into those crew carriers, citizens, and evacuated them back down to a safer area. This is another example out of that. We are constantly now seeming to, whether they be firefighters or law enforcement or the EMS personnel, literally throwing people on the rigs and getting them out until, you got the rig full, you go down, take them back into a safe area and come back and get more. Like I said, it's been a very trying time, and some of what we're dealing with. I look at the Lake Napa area of Sonoma, and they've been hit by fires. We're getting so good at it. It's almost like, looking at Louisiana right now and having to evacuate hospitals. We've evacuated some hospitals several times over the last couple of years, the entire hospital. It is just something that we're having to readjust. And the real sad thing about part of what we're dealing with is that, unlike a hurricane where we know what's coming, we may know a wind event is coming, but we don't evacuate people ahead of those wind events. Although once the fire starts, then we have less time to accomplish those missions. And that's really the hard part out of this, is these fires are moving so quickly, so fast. It is just, we just cannot move resources quick enough or fast enough to deal with them.
How do you communicate those kinds of changes, those directions, when as a fire chief, and you've got all these resources out in the field? How are you communicating with them, both philosophically and technologically? I mean, are you driving specific things they're doing, or are you giving them more guidance and let them make on the ground decisions?
A lot of decisions really are made by those first responders out there, whether it's the company officer that's in charge of the engine, whether it's the law enforcement folks that are out there. Those are really the folks that are driving some of this. If you're the battalion chief who ends up being an incident commander, and you're communicating with your law enforcement partners, you have to have enough, you have to take enough situational awareness, what's going on, and seeing that, hey, this is overwhelming, and then pulling those triggers. And what we're trying to do is educate folks a little bit more. It's something we just haven't trained in the past, to shelter in place and do those things. That I said we're really having more of a conversation of today, and more training and more education. And again, it all really comes down to lessons learned. And again, because of because of the internet and media capabilities, we're better able to communicate with these particular issues right now than we have, than 20 years ago, in which we didn't have them. So we can more quickly share some of these items up. Who would have thought, as we're today on a webinar, boy, we used to do some of the webinars up until COVID. Boy, you and I now would say, well, this is a pretty everyday occurrence being on a webinar. In fact, several of them during the course of a day. And so I think from that standpoint, we're doing even a much better job of communicating, and surely doing a lot more town hall meetings and those other ways to educate not only our folks, but educate the public and those things that we're seeing out there.
Yeah. How about from the business perspective? How are California businesses or other businesses in the West that you've seen dealing with the increased size of these fire seasons? How are they preparing their folks and dealing with it? And are you getting the cooperation and engagement from them that you need to be able to fight them effectively?
I think we're doing pretty good, although I would tell you that we are, again, dealing with a number of issues. But California in particular, between wildfires and what we call public safety power shutoffs, PSPS, it has really changed the environment, and now you've added COVID in there. It's really hard for business to survive. But I think at least one case we had before we ran into the lightning series we have now, first lightning fires we had a fire called the LNU complex, eventually covered 5 counties. In my job with Western Fire Chiefs, we got a call from one of our clients that was in the Solano County. They deal with pharmaceutical, a company in which they mail ship and mail things out quite regularly. They want to know what the chances are of their building burning down. I said, well, it's a tilt-up. You've got a big parking lot. Unless you have ember intrusion, you're probably in pretty good shape. But the bottom line is, I said, you're going to be smoked in. You're probably going to be evacuated out of there. And well, if we need to continue to get this done. I need to ship. I need to move this to another one of my facilities out of state. Will be recommendation. My recommendation, as I said, if you want to reach requirements and keep your customers happy, would be to move. For them, that's a lot of money. Not to mention, now they're not, employees aren't going to be able to come to work. Only a couple of days they had to do that, but they adjusted quite well. So that's one example. But again, I think the businesses are having to adjust a lot more than what they've had. And I've told people for quite a while that, oh, you can't possibly burn down an entire community. And I said, oh, yeah, you can. And I've been around long enough, and I would tell people, they always say, well, it can't get any worse. And I said, it can always get worse. We're fighting Mother Nature, and a lot of what we do, and a lot of these natural disasters, and we try to do the best job with getting people out of harm's way and mitigating the emergency. So our businesses, I think, are doing a pretty good job, but they're no different than the citizens. And ready, set, go. It's educating everybody out of that drill. It's keeping, having a business continuity plan is what you and I in our business would tell folks today is what they really need to have.
Yeah.
The larger your company, and the less you're prepared, the larger the financial impact is going to be to your customers and your ability to supply them services. And then it's how quickly after an emergency you can recover. If you're relying upon power, and the power's not going to be around, is your business plan have something in there so you can bring in generators and make things run out of that side of the house. And if the water's not running and you still want to run your business, you're going to have power, and then you better bring in the porta potties. There's a number of things businesses can do, should do, and should work out of this. One of the things we do some work in, and we'll probably talk a little bit later, but just if you're relying upon communications, and emergency responders rely upon the land mobile radios as one of their primary ways. Well, if you don't have backup power to those sites, you're in trouble. If you haven't started working with legislators in your states and in your communities to ensure you have backup power for the cellular industry that we rely so heavily upon for our communications, good luck, because again, you better have, I always tell people, what's plan A, B, C, and I said there's 26 letters in the alphabet. After that, in the business that in ICS and NIMS, what do you do when you run out of division A through Z? Well, then it's AA, BB, CC, and it makes people laugh, but actually you really need to be flexible and nimble enough and this side if you really want to survive and do the right things. At the end of the day, you got the hardened part of your business, and the other part of it is your employees that really make it run day in and day out.
Yeah.
If you're electronic capable and you're not backed up off site in the cloud somehow, you stand a good chance of having a hard time recovering. No different than making sure that in today's day and age that you have good cybersecurity and your people know what to do or what to open and not open when they get emails.
Yeah. Hey, you know, I did a session, another webinar with the National Conference of State Legislators last week, and the topic was continuity of operations for government and emergency management. And it said basically what you said. We're getting really good at working remotely and apart from everything, but our Achilles heels are comms and people. And if you lose one of those, you can't function. So yeah, you're right. You really need to focus, whether you're government or a business, comms and people. It comes down to that. Everything else you can probably wing, but not those two things.
Yeah, it's crucial. And again, you know, if from an electronic standpoint, if your business is very good and you've got, you know, everything's internal and you got great firewalls, the real question is, how do you operate from home and still ensure security? You use a VPN, or how are you doing that to ensure you protect your firewalls on that side of the house and this other side of the business? And I always tell people, I go, well, you know, who would have thought, you know, I've been through a transition in government probably like you have. Emergency management, you know, fire service, emergency management was one thing, then came Homeland Security. And, you know, the Homeland Security side of the house and all the cybersecurity and all the infrastructure issues that we've gotten into over the last really, you know, 20 years. It's been very interesting watching it and evolve. And it's, you know, our smaller government, our smaller businesses probably are more at risk than anybody else out there by really not, you know, taking the time to invest in that security and making sure they have a continuity of operation plan in place for what they do.
Yeah. Well, Chief, let's move on to recovery and cover that a little bit. Hopefully, cooler temperatures, snowfall, we'll start to see the downside of the fire season out west. What will California and other states start thinking about, you know, as those fires decline? How do they recover from this year's storms and start preparing for what's coming next year? What will they be doing internally to do that?
You know, I would tell you you know, we're still a long way from being out of the woods here, at least in California. But I would tell you this is that recovery right now, the key word is really taking care of those citizens who have lost, you know, are out of their homes, either damaged or have lost everything. There's a segment of our population that is, you know, more influential than others. Some are, you know, are struggling more than others. And those are the ones that we really need to provide that safety net and find a way to, one, take care of their basic needs. Housing, you know, put them in shelters of some type, and then transition them out of the shelters into some type of future temporary housing until we can sort out where they're going to be, whether they were rentals or whether they, you know, lost a mobile or whatever it may be. Those are the first things that are crucial, as well as coming up with, if you lost records and your driver's license or whatever else you may have. Those are the things you and I know that, you know, from a local emergency manager up to, you know, whether it be a city to the county to the state, that really need to be provided in there, working with our federal partners out there. And most people don't know this, but there's a great deal of work that goes on at those levels of government. And they really need to be on the same page. They really need to work together. It's really important in how they message that information out to the public at all levels of government, is what I see. Communication, coordination, and collaboration are the backbone to this whole drill. And it's not, you know, take the politics out of it, take the different parties that we have. It's really about taking care of the citizens. That's what government really has to do. So as we work that recovery, the housing, and then what we look for long term. I've been very fortunate to be in conversation last week with the state of Oregon at their Wildfire Economic Recovery Council meeting that they had, and as we talked about these different aspects, because first of all, to get you know, you lose your house or something, there's actually got to be cleanup. There's household hazards that are there. Those are going to be taken care of. They've got to be coordinated. Sometimes government will come in and do it. California surely did it after 2017, 2018. Oregon's in the process of, to clean it up, to get the sign-offs and everything. Those are the ways to get things moving ahead real quickly. Most people don't realize this, but debris management, boy, what a big animal that is to deal with right now. Because at the end of the day, all that debris has got to go someplace, and in some cases, your local dump or landfill facility may not be capable of taking it all, and if it is, maybe you had an 8-year cycle left on that landfill. Maybe now when you're done, it ends up being 3 to 5. Who knows? But those are the things that are really interesting. I can tell you after the Paradise fire, we were hauling things from Paradise all the way down to the Bay Area just to deal with some of those issues. And so again, it's extra traffic along the roadways. Those are heavy trucks, heavy equipment. Creates some additional problems and responses for the locals that are out there. Those are the things that locally, the things we're looking at the end of the day. How quickly we can get things recovered. As I told the folks as I was chatting with in Oregon, I said, I'll chat with this. I know nobody's in a hurry to get rebuilt, and as soon as you get that site cleared, start building on it. But I said, if you build to the current building codes and you don't take a look at the problem that we're having with the prior building codes versus what California's learned from the 2008, then you're just building tomorrow's problems. Again, just be repetitive damages you're probably looking at, much like we look at, if we don't learn anything from how we build after hurricanes or in a floodplain, all those same similar issues. And I would really tell you that on a wildland side, we're now killing more people in the West than have been killed in hurricanes in previous times. And so I think those are things we really need. As I told them, I would say, I know it's important to get those done, get people back rebuilding, but it's also important to start building towards the future. And one of the things I would share with you is that take a lesson out of California. You could take it out of Oregon or Washington, but I'll share this with you. Some of the most economically challenged folks are those who are probably in mobile home parks. And I tell folks, I said, they're there for a reason. And I would generally tell you that what I've learned in 42 years is that generally the people who are in mobile homes, that when they're paid off, generally probably don't continue to maintain some of the coverage that they have because for a reason at the end of that drill. And so when they lose everything, they're really lost everything. But I tell them, I said, when some of these fires you're dealing with, I said, at one side of the equation, you had a wildland fire come into your community. I said it could have been a down line during that 80, 85 mile an hour wind that dropped inside that mobile home park and burnt it down without any wildland. I said, so, and while we're trying to save money and trying to save space, maybe it's the time to start looking at having more separations, much like we built subdivision in zero clearance lots. Again, in 2017 in Santa Rosa, that fire went into an urban area, and I say it's no longer a wildland fire, it's now an urban conflagration, which we don't talk about as much as we did during my early days. And those are the types of things I really think that are really good to really take a look at into the future. At the other end, there's all the politics of, between the homeowner who doesn't want to go there, the builders, the realtors, but it's really the next place we really need to start taking a look at. And building towards the future.
Yeah, the commonalities between fires and hurricanes are startling. And, the lack of insurance coverage, the desire for the citizens to build back quickly, but the recognition that if you don't do it properly, you're just simply seeding the problems for the next storm. So hopefully, the good news is that you're right. As a nation, we've done a really good job on reducing the loss of lives from hurricanes, and we can start taking a look at how can we apply the lessons we've gotten on that to help us get to the same place on fires. Well, Chief, we got just a couple more minutes and a couple of questions from folks. One of them comes in it's about the California's budget. So one of the issues will be this huge fire season. you're going to need to regroup and retool and resupply for next year. At the same time, the state is probably, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but probably looking at a several $billion shortfall. How will the state deal with that? How will the fire chiefs across the state deal with that issue?
I would tell you we've gone from being, billions of dollars in the black before COVID to now we're in a deficit spending. Originally, when COVID first started, we thought we'd be about a 12 to 18 month period of recovery. Latest is now 24 to 36. The wildfires that we've had right now, I would tell you that the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection state agency that has a lot of responsibility for state responsibility fires in California has already burned through its entire E-fund for the season. So now they're going to have to go back to the legislature to get additional funds. Part of the news is that we have both FMAGs that are 75% available, eligible for reimbursement for those funds that meet that criteria. And then we have presidential as well. So we will probably be a 90-10 split that we work. Of course, that's totally at the discretion of the president. So sure, we'll do good in some, but again, still surely not going to cover all those costs. So we're adjusting. We're doing the best we can. The impact really that I continue to see on a national basis is not our wildland. It's really going to be the COVID. But I will share this with you. If you're in a community, and there are going to be several of them out there, especially in Oregon, that wiped out entire communities, you also took the tax base. So their ability to recover is even going to be harder, or the school district that's there. So it's going to be harder. At least in California, we've been lucky enough that state budgets were good enough in past years that we made commitments to shore up those loss of property taxes to the local government and give them some time to recover. But we're going to be struggling in some ends, but on the same end, California is very resilient in its overall budget. We're the 5th largest economy in the world, so we should be able to recover from it. But I'll share this with you. And as we're talking about, we'll leave a little bit of wildland disaster. COVID as an emergency, really followed by civil unrest and protests that we're still dealing with in different parts of this of the country. And every time a new one comes up, has impacts not only to that community but across the whole nation that we're dealing with. And those numbers are staggering to cover that as well. California ran into a power shortage crisis in the middle of all this, in which, because the hottest point anywhere in the world was Death Valley earlier this year. In fact, I just read a new along our coastlines, the hottest it's ever been anywhere in the world along the coast. Just read that the other day. California, as we try to be green and shed ourselves of our nuclear power, we are struggling with making sure we have enough power during these critical times. And of course, we didn't quite do that and left a lot of people in the dark. That was only followed by our wildfires. And our wildfires, while we were burning, hurricanes hit the Gulf and actually impacted our ability to get EMAC resources from several of those states. Yeah. So that was only followed by our what we call our public safety power shutoffs, and we continue to struggle. And I will tell you this, that we're always looking down the road, because in this business, you and I know, you're only as good as your last emergency. But you always want to be, I always tell folks, I want to be judged on what we did versus what we didn't do. So today, one of the things we're looking at when the winter comes, and we're looking at the runoff, we're looking at flooding and mud flows and those types of things that we're going to have to deal with, much like we did in early 2018 after the 2017 fires in Santa Barbara, in which we had a huge mudslide that came in and killed folks as well out of that. So those are the types we're looking for. And I would tell you this, is that California is a great place to take lessons learned from, and we're unfortunately very much like I think you were when your time in Florida, a very disaster-prone state for some of what we do. One of the trends I'm really watching is this alert and warning with the public, and our ability to do a better job of getting people out of harm's way quicker and faster, and making sure we have resilient communications out there with backup systems. Like I said earlier, whether they be our land mobile or the cellular industry providing cellular backup. At some point, we're really going to have to, even if we get the towers and everything to stay up, that our fiber optic cable was in underground so it could survive or not. Because we could have the site still stand, but lose the fiber optic cable and how quick we can get it back in there. Because without that, we still don't have cellular capability. We've become so relied upon it in so many ways. I think those are the things I really look at, overall in the world that we live in. And I would tell you that from a Western standpoint, I've had the international fire chiefs out just recently, and I said they want to come to California. I said, no, I want you to come to Oregon too. And so I was able to get them both to California and Oregon. I said, the wildfire problem isn't just a California. Look at Arizona earlier this year. You look at Montana, Washington, Utah, Nevada. I think much like the country did with hurricanes, we're really going to have to ramp up what we do with wildfires in the West as a whole. And I think that there's a lot of room for improvement still to come, and a lot of ability that we need to work on. One of our biggest shortfalls, we want to bring firefighters from across the United States to help us, but it's hard to bring folks that aren't trained in wildland and put them in harm's way, even if they're firefighters, out of that drill. So that's the other thing I would share and leave you with. And I hope that helps you with some of my thoughts today.
Chief, this has been fantastic. And frankly, we could keep doing this for several hours, but we do have a window and we filled it completely. So thank you very much for your time today. Audience, thank you for joining us. This has been terrific. I've learned a lot. Chief, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll wrap it up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bryan and Chief Zagaris, for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar, Part 3 of Wildfire Preparedness and Response Plan, Best Practices and Lessons Learned. We look forward to seeing you next time for another insightful discussion.